Welcome to Figure Eight, where we feature inspiring stories of women entrepreneurs who have grown their businesses to 7 and 8 figures revenue. If you're in the mix of growing a bigger business, these stories are for you. Join us as we explore where the tough spots are, how to overcome them, and how to prepare yourself for the next portion of the climb. I'm your host, Julie Ellis. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and a growth and leadership coach who co-founded, grew, and exited an 8-figure business. This led me to exploring why some women achieve great things. And that led to my book, Big Gorgeous Goals. Let's explore the systems, processes, and people that help us grow our businesses to new heights. If you're interested in growing your business, this podcast will help. Now, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Figure Eight, where we chat with women entrepreneurs. And today I have Gina Schaefer with me. Gina, like many of us, started her business because she saw a need in the market. She moved into a forlorn neighborhood that needed a hardware store, and when she couldn't find one, she decided to build one. When she thought the recovery community needed businesses to believe in them, she became one of those businesses, and she helped overcome equality in business. She's done many super interesting things. She built her business to 13 hardware stores. She has a book called Recovery Hardware, which chronicles her experiences in building a business while learning from non-traditional teachers like folks from the recovery community and returning citizens. She's a strong advocate and a spokesperson for causes directly related to raising wages, anti-monopoly legislation, and small business development. And one of her guiding principles is coming from a treasured quote. I always wondered when someone would do something about that. And then I realized I was somebody. So today, welcome, Gina. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm so interested in your journey as you built this amazing business on sort of small urban footprint stores and in an industry that probably doesn't have a lot of women.
No, and those of us that are here were hidden, tended to be hidden when I first joined the co-op. That I had to look very hard to find my cohort.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
And yeah, they ones who were there had their heads down and they were working hard and they knew they
building
were
really
the
great businesses.
right, right.
Yeah,
And you were able to build a really great business from that one hardware store in your neighborhood to 13.
yeah. We have. I've had two that failed, so I always feel like I need to give some credence to that, only because I feel like when I talk about the successes in the journey, um, it often sounds like it's too positive in my head. Like there's no way things were that good. I very conveniently overlook the negative things or forget some of the struggles that I had. But we did unfortunately have two stores that didn't work. So technically, there have been 15 over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I think those are the things we often learn the most from, the
Yeah.
ones that don't work.
Yeah, they're hard to forget. Like, what did I do wrong? What could we have done differently? Just one more day. I mean, we ran both of them for 10 years. And so it's not that we didn't try, but we couldn't get out of the leases that we were in. And so we did not give up until the very last day we could finish those leases. And so we tried everything.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
hard part about retail too, right? Is you are in for the long game even when you have no
yes,
idea whether things will work out.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about how I mean, obviously you saw a need in your neighborhood. How did you go from that to actually opening a hardware store?
Yeah, so I mean, the origin story is pretty funny, I guess. I was working for some tech startups in Washington D.C. in the states, and the final company that I worked for was the fourth company to go out of business that I had worked for, and so I kept getting laid off. I was working for these um, just startups that would get all of this money and then fail. And the last time it happened, the general counsel walked into my office and he said, "Hey, call the investors and apologize, and then pack your stuff and go home," as if that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And so I I did exactly what he asked me to, and I was driving back from the suburbs to my home in downtown Washington, and I started thinking about the neighbors and all of the things that we wished we had in this neighborhood that we were helping to revitalize. And one of the things that we asked for all the time, or we talked about, was a hardware store. And so I thought, well, I mean, I don't have a job. Why can't I open a hardware store? The most natural thing in the world, right?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you from that drive home to actually opening the store?
Yep, I gave birth to the first one. It was 9 months. It was probably longer than that, but that's the story as I tell it. About 9 months, I guess. I had to do a lot of work. So ACE, I'm a member of the ACE Hardware Cooperative. A lot of people don't know that ACE is a cooperative, and the programs for new investors now are so much better and different and more robust than when I first started. And so there was a lot of work, physical labor that I had to do because there wasn't those like wraparound support services there are now. And I was also opening in a building that was just really kind of derelict. And so it might take as long now because there's a lot of perfectionists that open businesses. I like to be fast, and at the time, that was about as fast as we could do it.
Right. And did that it
Yeah.
must have felt like a really long time for someone who likes to be fast.
I mean, it felt like years. We One funny example of that time frame is because the building was old and needed a lot of renovation, it needed all electrical and heating updated. And in the middle of winter, so we opened in March of 2003, and that winter prior, I got tired of waiting for the contractors to finish, and I asked Ace to just ship the products and send me a visual merchandiser. And I remember working in literally in the dark with two women. We would wear gloves with the fingers cut off and coats because there was no heat and we had to merchandise the products. And we would all go home at 4 when the sun went down because there was very little natural light in the space. And so that was an example. I don't really think of myself as an impatient person, but I was tired of waiting for the people who were supposed to be helping me get this business open to get their stuff done.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And you get in that place where all you're doing is writing checks and spending money. And,
that's
until those
exactly what we were
doors
doing.
open, nothing's coming in.
Yeah. I've told a lot of entrepreneurs that since we can wait until everything's perfect, but nothing is ever perfect. And so the second we can start putting money in the cash register, and when I say we now, there's two components. My husband joined me about 3 months after I opened that first business. He decided, he came home from work one day, said, "You're having way too much fun. Can I join you?" And so he's been my business partner ever since. And we might get to this later, but we're now selling the business to the team through what's called an employee stock ownership program. And so we now is really my teammates are part owners. But we've said since then, every time we've opened a new location, the second we can start putting money in that cash register, we are opening the doors, whether we're ready or not. Now we need permitting and inspections passed, and heating and lighting helps at this point. But if it doesn't look perfect, it doesn't matter. People want to buy the things they need in their neighborhoods, and they're walking in the door when we're setting up anyway. So
Yep. And so you had said to me at one point, so your average store size is like 8,000 square feet, which is really
yes,
small. And so,
yeah.
how do you merchandise that store and how many products do you sell compared to, those of us who live in the suburbs think about those big suburban, hardware stores?
Yeah, so we have about 20 between 25 and 30,000 items, which is actually a lot. So the big suburban stores sell I mean I don't know their SKU count, but they sell things they can sell in mass quantities. And so often they have fewer products because they might I'll just a, a toilet seat. I'll use that as an example. They might have one option, and they have 1,000. I'll have 5 options, and I'll have it in a much smaller footprint because of our space. And so the merchandising is very different. We, depending on the jurisdiction that we're in, there's a width requirement for the aisles. So wheelchairs and people can comfortably pass through. And so we maximize whatever that is, that's where we go, which is also smaller than you would see in a suburban store, or tighter visually and spatially for the customer. And so we go as high up as we can, 8 feet in most cases, with storage above it if the ceilings are high. The aisles are as narrow as legally allowed. And we pack things in. And a couple of my stores have garden centers, we call them, but it's a couple thousand square feet outside. Most of my stores sell live goods and plants, mulch, bagged goods on the sidewalk. And so we maximize any kind of space, even outside of the store, that we're allowed to give us more square footage.
That's so interesting. And I would
Yeah.
think too, depending on neighborhood, you could have some more specialized items that, if it's a really old neighborhood and old houses need different things, or like that sort of assortment tailoring that can happen.
Yeah, we've done that. My second location opened in 2005, and the first location was actually in an up and coming neighborhood where there were not a lot of children, and the second one was in a more established neighborhood where there were. And so it was a really good lesson for us early on to cater to the demands and needs of the neighborhood. That neighborhood didn't have anything like, for example, we started selling garden supplies that were built for children. Because there were a lot of yards, but there was nowhere for moms or dads to buy those kinds of things. And so that's just a minor example of how we figured out how to tweak the product assortment. Um, some of the planters that we carry, the grill sizes that we carry, all of those things depend on what the neighborhood wants and needs. We started renting tools because several of our neighborhoods have a lot of small condos. People don't want to buy the tools; they don't have a place to store them, or they might only need them once. So why would you buy a drill if you're only going to use it to hang a picture every now and then? And so we would rent them so people didn't feel obligated to buy one, or they were buying them, using them, and returning them.
Right. Which you didn't
And
want.
that's also really frustrating.
Yeah.
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 Because that's just hard for you to then
Yeah.
deal with.
Exactly.
That's a great way of also, I think, weaving yourself into the fabric of a neighborhood,
Yes.
becoming a part of it, becoming that go to place for knowledge, information, all kinds of things.
Exactly. Yeah. We tried we were kind of charting new territory. The co-op didn't have a lot of stores that were urban, and so we didn't have a lot of role models. The few that we did have were tremendously helpful across the country, but there was a lot that we were learning on the fly as we were growing, especially because once we opened that second store, we opened one store every year for 10 years. And so we were experiencing some pretty rapid growth at the same time, trying to still figure out what all 25,000 items that we carried actually does.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, the optimizing at the same time as the growing and the scaling.
correct.
And yes, now you must have gotten pretty good though in terms of a process for opening stores, what it took, the efficiencies that you can find when you've done it over and over again.
Yeah, I had a teammate who said to me one day, "Hey Gina, do you keep opening locations so you can fix your screw ups from the last one?" And we got the biggest chuckle out of that. It's so true because we would figure out something that made us feel so smart. And then the next time we'd open a store, we would get that thing right. And we would inevitably either forget, overlook, screw up some other component. Um, or there would be some new something. Like I guess my first two stores didn't have any parking, and the third one had a public lot. And so even just some of the logistics with that were things that we hadn't experienced before. So we learned along the way, but we still screwed up along the way.
I think it's the sign of any good project is that it never
Yes,
goes exactly. And then you learn and then you
exactly.
try again. And sometimes you make those mistakes over and over. And then
Yeah.
you wonder
Well, and how you
why.
roll with them. Yeah, how you roll with them makes a huge difference. The the psychological toll or emotional toll that those kinds of errors can make, or just the constant trying to figure things out. If you can do it with the right attitude, you can continue to do it. And that's exactly what we were doing.
And how did it change for you as you opened more stores with a bigger sort of infrastructure? It's the ship is bigger, everything's, can feel more cumbersome and more people need to be in the know and some of the things that happen as you get bigger and bigger. How did you tackle that and what was it like?
I had a fantastic mentor who said to me one day, the bigger you get it, the easier it doesn't get. And I think maybe that's a misconception among a lot of people that the bigger I get, the more help I'll have or the more money I'll have. Um, we put a bunch of things in place at the beginning that we were very smart about. One of them was just solidifying what our core values were. And the reason that I pick on that one was because a lot of people said going from one to two locations was going to be super hard. And I realized, hardware retail is very generational, very mom and pop. At the time, the majority of the owners in the co op had one location. And so when I started hearing that repeatedly, I was thinking, the struggle that folks are having is they can't be in two places at once. And they're trying to warn me about that. And that first location for me was so incredibly hard to open because I didn't know anything. And so everything was something new and I had to be excited about it. So I thought, gosh, by the time I do it this again, it's going to seem very easy. Um, but I knew when we went to that second location that I wasn't going to be able to manage both of them. And so we created um, really just our value system and we documented them. We worked on it with the team. And then we promoted somebody within to manage the current store and within to manage the next store. And that just set us on this path of continuously paying it forward, if you will, as we opened, including when we went to Baltimore, Maryland, which is an hour away, taking someone from DC who wanted to move to Baltimore, who already understood our core values and how we wanted to operate. And he moved to Baltimore and opened our stores there for us. And so that charted this path that I think really made um, it made it easier. I mean, people think that I'm exaggerating or I'm making it sound too easy, but that was a huge help for us.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a firm core values believer. We spent time and effort crafting our core values for Mabel's Labels, and it was hugely transformational for us in
Yeah.
really articulating what it all meant and getting the right people on the team who believed in it with us and who could really
Yep.
pull. We all pulled in the same direction.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. And then on top of that, we always knew. Now, my husband is our CFO, and thank goodness because he's just brilliant when it comes to numbers. But we were always very diligent about making sure that we didn't hire a new support staff person until we could truly afford it, which meant that we couldn't avoid those roles. One of us had to fill those roles or someone else on the team already. And so, we had, um, I think, 3 stores before we promoted a buyer, and she was someone who worked in our store already. And then 3 or 4 stores before we promoted someone to really start controlling our inventory. And he had worked in this, he worked in the plumbing department. And so we very organically grew as we could afford that role. And if we couldn't afford it, we had to fill it with our own, our own sweat, which we did.
Yep. It's amazing
Yeah.
what you can learn.
Yes.
Jobs you
Yeah,
never
and it's
thought you would
amazing.
do.
Yes. Sorry. No, and it's amazing. Like, the expression work smarter, not harder. If you are efficient, you can get a lot done in the day. And some of that efficiency for me was tough because I get very excited about the next thing. And like I said, we opened one a year for 10 years. So I was constantly on the lookout for new projects, which meant there was always a new project going on. And so, you have to balance what the tasks are to maintain the current ship as you continue to add to the fleet. And so, there were times in our past where I can see where I wasn't as efficient because I would get so excited about the new stuff that I would drop the ball on the old stuff because you really have to keep that focus.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
did you get to a point where you were better at balancing, or did you get to a point where you could hire people who really could focus on the old stuff to free you up? Like, what was the secret to how it worked for you?
That's exactly what we did. So each one of the managers was really treated like an owner. And now they actually are, which is really cool. But at the time, that was always our mentality. They were in charge of everything within their 4 walls. They hired, they fired, they counseled, they did payroll. We use an automated ordering system with ACE, but they had to approve it to make sure that they were getting the products they wanted. And so they were trained and very much expected to act like they were the owner of the business. The turnover at the assistant manager and management level for us has historically been less than 10%. Like, it's fantastic, our turnover for retail. So, whether that means we've picked the right people or we just have a really fantastic staff, or, I mean, a combination of all of it, that left me, or my husband and I, that let us have the ability to continue that growth and add to the support staff. So once we had someone in buying doing the buying, we didn't have to do any of that. And, so we've only had, we're almost 21 years old. We've had 4 people in the buying role, which I think is really impressive. We had a senior buyer who worked with us for 10 years before she retired, and she trained a junior buyer and then the replacement. And so it's been a nice continuation. And our senior leadership team meets once a week. So if there's issues or questions, but otherwise they're in charge. Like, she and her assistant are expected and capable of doing all of the buying, with the exception of that automated system from ACE.
Right. And
So some of it's empowerment.
how do you, yeah, and how do you think as a leader you built that sort of culture of accountability and empowerment within your team?
I think a little bit of it is trust. So I always said, if you don't trust the people you work with, you've probably hired the wrong people. And then I think you have to articulate that I am going to trust you to do this job, Julie. Um, and there will be checks and balances, but you're going to do it and you're going to rise to the occasion. And again, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but they almost always have. I can think of one time on the senior leadership team in 21 years where we completely fell flat in that whole concept for us, and we had truly hired the wrong person. And I think she worked with us for maybe 3 months. She was in HR, and it was almost immediate that we had made the wrong choice. So you have checks and balances. You make sure you hire the right people. In some cases, they've grown up in the business. Like our junior buyer started in, well, several of our back office staff, maybe all of them now, started working on the sales floor. So they understand what it's like to be a sales associate and provide customer service. And they know where and how the products go and look and what customers are asking for. And so that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. When you don't want the disconnect between the customer facing and the admin background, you need that synchronicity for everything to work properly.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you trained them to be owners and now they're becoming owners.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting as an exit strategy, a retirement strategy. What can you tell me? How did you decide to do the ESOP and what's that been like?
So we decided Mark and I started talking about it probably very seriously in late 2020, early 21. People had asked me for years what my exit strategy was, and we hadn't really thought about it. I mean, I think we're still young. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to retire. I mean, people started asking me when I was 35 what my exit strategy was. And again, it's very multi-generational. I don't have children. So bringing in the next generation was not going to be an option for us. And then in the 2020, 2021, a bunch of protests started happening in Washington, D.C. The political climate was strife. The COVID was causing havoc. And a lot of those protests marched down the street in front of our main office. And we felt it very acutely. It had to do with income inequality, racial inequality, big business getting bigger and uglier, and all of those things that we heard about in the news. And one night at dinner, we were talking about what we could do to be part of the solution. And we had read about an ESOP, but we didn't know anything about it. And I said, why don't we figure out if this is something we can do? And so we started doing some research. We met with a few attorneys, a few advisors. I found another ACE owner who had formed an ESOP out west. I called him and just pestered the heck out of him. He was amazingly helpful. And that's when we decided that this was going to be the path for us. And it took us about 2 years from the time we started talking about it to the time we made the first sale to the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so tell me at a high level a little bit about how it works.
So you create a trust and you sell the business to the trust, and the trust basically holds the shares on behalf of the employees. And so that's the very simple explanation. It works like a qualified retirement fund, so kind of like a 401k. The employees don't put any money in. The business buys it on their behalf. So that's a very interesting component. A lot of people don't know that. They say things like, well, how can your cashier afford to be an owner? Which is a little narrow minded, but regardless, we say it doesn't matter. He or she doesn't have to actually put any money in. So once you have worked with us for 1 year and 1,000 hours, you are automatically part of the ownership share. And then the business is valued once a year. So unlike the stock market where the cost of a share could fluctuate daily, in an ESOP, you only get a valuation once a year. So you get one shot for it to be up and one shot for it to be down. And then it stays that value for another 365 days.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
if somebody leaves the company, what happens to their share?
We have to buy it from them. So it vests, you vest 20% for 5 years until you're fully vested. And so if you are terminated or you retire or quit, we have to pay you for whatever amount you have already vested. And we have the terms of the plan are that we have 5 years to pay you out so that there's not, some
Massive
catastrophic
drain or Yep.
requirement, on
Yep.
the company. The only example or the only difference is, or the exception, when we announced the ESOP, if you were 65 or 63 years or older, you were automatically 100% vested because we wanted our folks closer to retirement age to be able to benefit. And that was amazing. We don't have a lot of older teammates, but the ones that the ones that were older that automatically vested ended up in a really nice place.
Nice. And that's
Yeah.
meaningful from an employer perspective, human resources and caring for your people perspective. So meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of my teammates that I talk about in my book was a gentleman who was homeless, and he started running. Long story short, he became a runner because of a nonprofit organization that had a really big influence on his life. And I like to say when I talk about him that he ran himself to an apartment. He's not homeless anymore, to a job, to a 401k, a healthcare program, and then he ran himself to becoming an owner in my company. And the reason it's really meaningful is that he ended up having a stroke a couple years later, and he had to finally quit working, but he was 100% vested in the ESOP because he was there when we made the announcement. And so he never would have had that money if we hadn't formed the ESOP, um, and then made that a particular requirement. So I love being able to think it's not life changing money in the sense that, it won't carry him for the rest of his life by any means, but he wouldn't have had it in that instance in his life when he truly needed it and when he had to quit if we didn't form the ESOP. So
Yeah. And now he's just one example of the kinds of people that you've hired who might not be thought of often, whose resume might not look that good, or, can't perform the way they're expected to in a job interview, or those, people are afraid of hiring people who are different, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
what
So
made you lean into it?
I mean, it was almost by accident. So we like to say that we remove the obstacles to employment. So when we opened that first location in the States, it was still legal to put a felony box on an application. It's been banned in most places. There was a ban the box campaign. And I think Washington, D.C. was probably one of the first places to ban it. But I didn't like that question. So I erased it from the application. And I didn't, my first employee had been in prison for 17 years. And I would have known that had I kept the box on the application, but he wasn't getting hired anywhere because of the box. And he ended up working with us for 10 years. He was amazing. I didn't know until after he had worked with us for quite some time that he'd even been in prison, much less for that long. He was a wonderful um, teammate. And so that stigma was gone. And then down the street, so our neighborhood was really revitalizing. But one of the things that was in the community was this amazing healthcare organization that had a recovery program inside. And the second teammate that we hired came from that recovery program. And he was honest about it. He was upfront because he was afraid that we would hold it against him somehow, or if we found out there would be repercussions, which there would not have been. But he didn't know that. And he said, I'm 6 weeks clean. I used to use crystal meth. Will you give me a job? And the story is funny. He and I, in fact, I was with him yesterday. We still joke about it because I didn't know what that meant at the time. Like, it didn't occur to me that 6 weeks is nothing in the life cycle of, getting your life back on track from a substance use disorder. But he was amazing. And so he came and worked with us. And then he brought somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And before we knew it, we were hiring all these folks from the recovery clinic based on referrals, not because they were from there, but they were being referred anyway through that network. And so it was very organic. And then it just spread after that.
And how did that, like, if I look at sort of now the book you wrote, the causes that you believe in and support and, serve on the boards of, all kind of come out of some of that beginning of the people that you hired. And how did
Yeah.
it sort of like a seed you planted? How did it grow and become such a part of your life?
I think I'd like to think everyone can do this, but if I look back on the last 21 years, I can almost see moments of empathy that hit me over the head when I had, like, when an understanding really solidified and cemented itself in my heart. You can't unsee it or unfeel it. So the minute that I realized, since we talked about him, the minute that I realized I was working with someone who had been in prison for 17 years, my mind immediately shifted about what that meant to know somebody like that, to be able to ask questions about someone who had that experience in his or her life. And we started to build this very transparent workplace. If if I wanted to ask you a question about your experience, we build a workplace where I could ask you that question and you felt comfortable answering it. And so I think I'm kind of babbling your answer, but the moments of empathy that were occurring because of the people we were interacting with, and cities just in general are full of a diverse group of people. it really informed how we grew and hired going forward. I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does, it does, and I just think it's interesting because people do end up with jobs because of their network and because of referral and because of all of those things. And so as a business that had, doors open for things that weren't typical resume type things, I can see how it would grow.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the beauties that came out of writing the book was being introduced to companies and businesses all across the country that do similar things. And I wouldn't say that I thought we were the only one, but oftentimes there's a little bit of a stigma. I mean, I got called crazy, I got called stupid. I heard everything you could imagine when some people would find out who we were hiring and working with. And so it was really gratifying for me to be introduced to other businesses across the country that were doing similar things.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny sometimes how you're in that little echo chamber, wondering, convinced of what you're doing, but not knowing, what else is out there.
Yes. Yeah. We're not crazy. We're also not special. And I never wanted us to be considered special. But until I found out that there were two or three or four, 17 of us, I felt a little more, special is not the right word, but lonely, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it is something to be talked about, I think. And the story, I mean, your book is behind you, so you are, which is amazing. But it is that sort of thing that like people are just uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
it isn't that they might not take a chance and do things, but they don't, they feel uncomfortable and so they do nothing. I think that's
They do
often the
nothing.
case when we're uncomfortable.
My first teammate that stole from us, which is typically what everyone assumes when I talk to them about hiring my favorite manager was a former drug dealer. What this is when I really got called crazy names. Um, the very first employee that stole from us was a 24-year-old college graduate with parents who owned a business in the Midwest. He had never been in prison. As far as I know, he had never had a substance abuse issue in his past. He had a college education. He was articulate. He had every amount of privilege that you could imagine, and he stole thousands of dollars from us. So when someone would say something like, how could you hire somebody who sold drugs, or how could you hire somebody who had been in prison, I told them about that kid. I'm like, you never know. And if you are going to immediately judge one group, that means you immediately have to judge everybody, because you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a difference it can make. Like now you've got long-term employees who own your business, who
Yeah.
are have blossomed and found their feet, and that is a huge difference in somebody's life.
Well, and you think about just as women, if you can see it, you can be it is a great expression. And to see women in the hardware industry made me believe that I could be a success in the hardware industry. To have a teammate who can say, I've been clean from a drug addiction for 20 years means the new people on our team can see him or her and know that can be them. And that makes all the difference in their recovery, in their health, in their success. Um, we've had folks who were frankly professionals somewhere else who hit rock bottom because of their substance use. And those places might not have wanted them back. And they have to start somewhere because people need a job, people need to pay their bills. And so if they had to start in a retail business at the very beginning all over again, they could and they did. And then they could work their way up and out if that's what they were looking for. And so we wanted to be that stepping stone.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
really, really great way of looking at it.
Thanks.
And so that obviously led to you writing the book. And now that you have employee ownership, what's next for you?
Well, um, as part of the succession planning, the exit strategy was my exit strategy. And so when we announced that we were selling the business to the employees, we announced that we were hiring a CEO to replace me. I decided that 20 years was long enough. Um, I'm still the chair of the board and majority owner, so they tease me that I can't get away. But I'm working on building a professional speaking career. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I'm taking some art classes. I mean, it's just been since July that my replacement started. I still meet with him weekly as a more of a mentor role. Um, advisor. And so I don't know, I'm just taking this year to have fun and figure out what I want to do next.
It's good. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that can be, I mean, for some entrepreneurs, and I know in my own story, sitting on the plateau was in a time of change was one of the hardest things because I think as entrepreneurs, we're so wired for the climb,
Yes.
world
Yes.
domination. And
Yeah. There's always something next.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it can be hard to just find yourself on that plateau and looking to sort of reinvent yourself for your next act.
Yeah. I like the expression serial entrepreneur. And when I meet one, I'm always impressed. But I also always feel like it's either somebody who can't relax or somebody who doesn't have a hobby. And I don't mean that as an insult because I mean, I probably should fall into that category. But I had so many other things that I wanted to do that I could take a break and do them, like taking a professional speaking class. That I was really, really grateful to have those opportunities. And I didn't feel like I immediately had to start um, building something as a business, even though it's fun to think about.
Which is a nice luxury to have for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So super nice luxury.
And I think it also like has it informed you at all about like where you can give back and what other things you might be able to do in your life that are, you know, about, helping lift up other organizations?
Yeah, so as a business, we had a ton of philanthropic efforts, and my husband and I did too. But now I get to think about them even more strategically. Like last night, I was invited to a meeting with a very interesting and diverse group of people who want to do impact investing in the DC region. And so, what that might mean is actually investing in startup companies. Particularly owned by we talked a lot about women of color because the investments made in that community are abysmal. And then we also talked about grant making. So, nonprofit organizations who want to build revenue streams to fuel the really amazing stuff they do in specific communities. So now I can think about stuff like that. And I think what would happen is even beyond, being able to put some money into the program, I have the ability to hopefully lend some wisdom or some experience to a young entrepreneur. And I would find that so much more gratifying right now than starting another business that I hope I can do more of that. And then on the national level, you mentioned it at the top of the podcast. I lend my voice as a spokesperson to a couple of causes, and I'll hopefully be able to do more of that too.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
But it is always interesting, I think, how the circles in our lives. So here you are back to the startup community that, you know, getting turfed out of your fourth role was what sent you
Yeah.
into entrepreneurship to begin with.
It's
And
all a big circle.
well, and
Yeah.
hopefully though, having somebody with the wisdom that you've now gained, you can help other entrepreneurs not end up out of business, right?
Maybe. Yeah. It
Yeah.
would be nice. And I think,
Hmm.
when I look back, there's so many more questions I should have asked. And I did ask a lot of questions, but a lot of them were geared towards our vendors. Like, what does this widget do? How do I fix this? Um, I just didn't have time to really stop and think about what should I be doing for HR? What should I be doing for finance? Um, and so now that I know just enough of those things to make me dangerous, I'd like to maybe help some folks not make the mistakes or have to wait as long as I did to figure out what they all mean or can do to improve the business.
Well, yeah, I know. I feel that way too. Like not in charge of anything, but I know a lot about many things,
Yes. Yes.
and so it's figuring out, right? But it does
Yeah.
sound like you'd make a perfect wing woman for somebody who needs help on a broad scale as they grow a business.
I hope so. Thank you for thinking that. I definitely hope so.
Good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. All of your links for your book and for you will end up in the show notes. And I thank you so much for this really, really interesting conversation.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you won't miss any episodes. Figure 8 isn't just a podcast. It's a way of seeing the big, gorgeous goals of women entrepreneurs coming to life. If you're interested in learning more, you can find my book, Big Gorgeous Goals, on Amazon anywhere you might live. For more about my growth and leadership training programs, visit www.julieellis.ca to see how we might work together. Read my blog or sign up to get your free diagnostic Are you ready for growth? Once again, that's www.julieellis.ca. When we work together, we all win. See you again soon for another episode of Figure 8.